Hey, Sens fans, welcome to today's episode of the Senstennial Podcast, and we're excited to welcome back long overdue TSN 1200 host and analyst, Chris Stevenson. So thank you for joining us tonight, CJ.
Always fun, guys.
Okay,
Lots to talk about. Yep.
Indeed,
Oh, yeah.
but first I want to start off with something that you probably didn't think that we'd bring up tonight. And that was the last time we had you on the show, which was November 23rd, 2021. I went back to the history books to
Wow,
check
that's
this.
a while. That is.
It's been that long.
Yeah.
Oh my
That
god.
long. And I'm sure we've tried to have you on like since then, but it's just never materialized. So
No, I don't think you asked. I don't think you liked the performance the first time around. They were just like, no, we don't need to have him back on.
well, okay. Ottawa's lineup the night before we recorded 3 years ago.
Yep.
So bear with me. So Kachuk,
Yep.
Norris, Stutzla. Okay, fine. Second line, Nick Paul, Chris Tierney, Connor Brown.
Ooh.
Third line, Zach Sanford, Shaw, and Watson.
Oh
my God.
And a fourth line of Formanton, Gambrell, and Ennis.
Oh my God.
On defense, we had Shabbat starting with Lassie
Zaitsev.
Thompson.
Oh.
Zaitsev was injured, I believe. Delzato alongside Zub, and Victor Mete and Josh Brown were on that third pairing.
Wow.
And starting in net was the one and only Philip Gustafson. And this was
Wow.
against the Colorado Avalanche. Now,
Wow.
the Sens lost 7-5.
I was gonna say that sounds like a 7-5 lineup
Yeah.
against Colorado
You know
at the
what,
time.
The fact that they scored 5 on Colorado with that lineup, hey, I'll take it. But
I think I remember that game.
what I love about the box score of that game, the backup goalie, it has as empty net. One shot against, one goal against.
And that's only what, 3 years, a little less than 3 years
yeah.
ago, you said?
Yeah.
Just under 3 years ago. So what I wanted to say is that previous summer, that was the summer where Dorian had boasted that the rebuild was over with that
Wow.
line. I mean, I'm sure there were injuries, but so like kicking off the show with that in mind, the lineup of 3 years ago and the rebuild being over then, how are you feeling now? And is the rebuild finally going to be over?
Geez, how do I put this? It feels like right now what they're going through is the deconstruction of the rebuild and then the regrouping after that deconstructing, because they're still, obviously Steve Staios wound up in a position this summer where he still had to clean up some of the mess, right? The Yakemchuk trade, it was never going to be a good fit. Like right from the beginning, you looked at it and you had to say another left shot defenseman was not what they needed, right? And they basically spent a year trying to force round pegs into square holes, which was a massive failure. And then, this summer, I think Staios recognized that there had to be more balance on that blue line. So, that was for me probably the biggest move among the skaters was trying to realign that defense and get a little bit better mix, better balance between left and right. And then addressing the goaltending had to be the other big fix that he had to face. So I'm reluctant to say at this point that I'm at all confident that they're a playoff team this year. I think they're going to be improved. But let's face it, they can improve by 10 points this year and still come up. And everybody would probably say that's not a bad bit of forward progress, and still come up short. But I feel like that's still where they are now, is that Staios still needs to repair some of the holes and repair some of the damage, both personnel wise, contractually, in terms of managing the salary cap. And that's where we kind of find ourselves now, is the rebuild over. I think you can say the rebuild is over, but it needs still some serious work to the foundation, I guess, is the best way to put it.
And I think you look at this roster and the rebuild. I would say, yeah, the rebuild is over, but every team that has rebuilt and is now a contending team is always going to be adding, and whether it's, you know, subtracting bad contracts and then adding that cap space, or adding legitimate players, or anything like that. It's the Sens have always been in that weird position that they, well, let's face it, Pierre Dorion name chased a lot of the time.
Oh, absolutely agree. That's a legit take, you know, and you think about the, and I guess it's easy to say it was a miscalculation at the time, but you know, when they went on that marvelous run in 2017, and Erik Karlsson was just marvelous, and you had so many great storylines converging that season, you know, from Craig and Nicole Anderson, and what they went through, and you know, just all kinds of different things that happened with the team.
Buck MacArthur's come back from his concussion and then making an appearance in the
Right on.
playoffs.
You
Yeah.
know,
And Bobby Ryan,
Bobby Ryan
yeah.
having a great run in the playoffs. All those, you know, wonderful stories kind of coalescing at that time. It looking back on it now, and I guess that's a big part of my job, is looking back on things with 2020 hindsight. But you know, that was a serious miscalculation of where this team actually was at that time, and going out, and that's a good way to put it, name chasing. Matt Duchene, another guy that kind of they fell in love with, or Pierre Dorion fell in love with, and went out and spent assets to get Matt Duchene, when, you know, maybe at that time that wasn't the right move. Maybe it was time for a more sobering look at exactly what they had in terms of the team, and recognizing that they were not one player away from going back to the Stanley Cup, you know, conference finals. So I agree that name chasing thing is had been an issue for sure.
And so now you've got that's interesting. So now you've got this interesting lineup with all these young guys that have the potential to take that next step, and Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle and Jake Sanderson. I could continue to name names,
Yeah.
but training camp has started, and as we talked about earlier, you know, they already played a preseason game. And are there any standouts so far in camp? Anybody that really caught your eye in the preseason? And
I thought Thomas Chabot looked like a guy who was coming off of a successful surgery, and the way he was whipping the puck around, the way he was skating in training camp. And then of course he goes out and he's like on the ice for every goal in the preseason game against the Leafs, and then my timeline is of course then flooded with Thomas Chabot's in midseason form already. He's on the ice for every goal against. I thought on that first couple of days of camp that I attended, I thought Thomas Chabot, the way he was skating and the way that he was whipping the puck around. You know, he had wrist surgery. Clearly, over the last couple of years, that had been an issue for him. He was not a threat from the blue line at all to score a goal, and I think a lot of it was because of him kind of battling through that injury. Now that it's been fixed, I'm anxious to see what exactly he can bring. So he was one of the guys that I like, and he was paired with Yakimchuk, and I know, you know, some people were saying that Yakimchuk had heavy boots. Don't see it. I think he moves around the ice just fine. And you can look at, you know, the tail of the tape and you see what a guy's size is. When I saw him for the first time, I was like, well, he's a lot
he
bigger
looks
than
huge.
he is huge. He is wide. He is a big boy. And I was, like I said, first time I saw him, I was like, oh, that's a bigger kid than what I thought he was going to be. And for his size, like I said, hearing that maybe skating was going to be a bit of a liability for him, seeing him move around the ice, I didn't see that. And certainly the goalie scored in overtime against the Leafs.
And Matt Murray to boot.
Sens legend.
Matt Murray, yes. Dangling McCabe and beating Marner. what a dream night for Senators
yeah.
fans.
Right.
Yeah.
A great example of how, he scored 30 goals in the dub. So he caught my eye. I'll tell you another guy who's really caught my eye, and I'm anxious to see how things go for him. And another guy who we believe, had been slowed by injury in Tim Stützle, but he has been an absolute buzzsaw in practice, to the point where they had a practice before the inter-squad game over in Hull in Gatineau on Saturday morning. And they've done a lot of work, a lot of drills down low, particularly with how Travis Green wants his centers to play. So their default position in starting is that the center is in the slot. And as the play evolves, he leaves the slot to go and support the defenseman on whichever side the defenseman is battling. Stützle was flying in there. And at one point, I think it was David Parent. I almost said a bad word. He nailed him and into the boards, great shoulder, right into the chest. And whistle goes, and Travis Green standing out at the blue line watching things going on. And he blew the whistle and he was like, "Timmy!" And he gave him the easy. And I thought, wow, that's a good sign when a guy who comes in with a reputation as being a hard-ass coach and wants guys, stressing pace and wanting guys to play with an edge. And here he is, like, telling a guy who's your number one center, a young guy, we're just in practice here, kid. Dial it back a little bit. So I thought that was another really encouraging sign. When you ask about guys who have caught my eye, he's right up there. And one other guy, he wasn't particularly noticeable last night, but I've really liked him, particularly in light of the obvious holes that they have in the bottom pair on the blue line is Addison. I don't think there is any question that he is going to be given a contract by the time
Yeah.
camp is out, and that he's going to be
Yeah.
he's going to be added to the mix there on the right side. It's unfortunate they don't have a little bit more depth on the left, but looking at that, JBD still, to me, hasn't proven that he's an absolute everyday lock National Hockey League defenseman. Maybe Travis Hamonic's going to be a little more useful now that he's gotten past the injuries that apparently dogged him last year. So maybe he can be a little bit more effective. And I do think that they're going to benefit just from him being around as a veteran
Yeah.
guy. But they do need a little more depth. So I've liked Addison. You got a guy who's played 152 games, I think, in the National Hockey League, which they really need in that bottom group. I don't think Hamonic's going to play a heck of a lot. So when you're looking at Tyler Clevin and you're looking at JBD, that's not a lot of games of experience. So I
Not
think
at
having
all.
a guy like, do you guys not think like having Addison in that mix with 152 games under his belt is a little bit of the experience that I think they're going to need back there.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think with him, he could even complement Clevin, because Clevin and Hamonic are, obviously different size of players. Clevin's quite a big fella, but, cut from the same cloth. They're both those guys who like to block shots, like to use the
Yeah.
physicality, all that. And I think when you have Addison, he reminds me of kind of more of like just for recency bias sake.
That's going to be Eric Brandstrom.
Yeah, similar to Brandstrom. No, but in the sense that
he
he's
reminded
kind
me
of
of
more of like a nifty defenseman. Go ahead.
Weidman.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Yeah,
Recently retired.
Recently retired Chris Weidman. Yeah, he kind of that when I saw him out there, that was kind of what I kind of the player that came to mind for me. But I definitely think that they with him having the experience that he's got, that's something that to me makes him just about a lock to get that last contract that they've got to hand out in training camp.
Yeah, and he's got better foot speed than Hamonic and JBD from what I watched last night anyway.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting going forward to see if he can beat out both those guys for a spot, because
And
obviously Hamonic's not going anywhere with his no move clause.
Right.
So
and does it not feel a little bit like you just need to have some insurance back there just because of Clevin and JBD, the lack of experience? I mean, we can get into the Tyler Clevin situation too. In my opinion, the poor kid is being done a huge disservice in this situation. I watched most of the games in Belleville, and he was fine. He was a good American Hockey League defenseman, but that's a huge jump going from the American Hockey League to the National Hockey League, and I just felt like maybe not boldly stated by the club, but certainly and you guys tell me what you think. Looking at your timelines and social feeds and everything, but it just felt like the fan base was feeling like, oh, Tyler Cleven's a lock just to come in and be like the third guy on the left side, and
which worries me.
Right. Absolutely, because part of me is like, well, if he had a decent camp, but they decided that he needed like maybe another half a year in the American Hockey League, I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. Like I would rather have guys marinate in the minors, maybe a little bit past, if you want to call it the best before date in the minors,
Yeah.
than to rush them into the NHL. And I just felt through the whole summer, and maybe again function of salary cap, contracts, everything else. But just like through the whole summer, everybody was just conceding a job to Tyler Clevin as the if you want to call it the fifth defenseman on this team on that left side. And I don't know if that's really fair to the kid, because now if he does struggle, everybody's going to be like, oh, what's wrong with Tyler Clevin? When all that's wrong with Tyler Clevin is he's a young man trying to play a very difficult position in the National Hockey League. So to me, that's one of the biggest and best storylines that's going to be coming out of this. I don't have any doubt that he's going to be starting the season in that spot. And that to me is going to be one of the most interesting things to monitor as things go on is, can Tyler Clevin handle it?
It is an interesting situation to be in, considering that about 6 months ago, it felt like the team had nothing but left-handed defensemen.
Right.
And now all of a
that's a great
sudden,
point.
outside of Shabbat and Sanderson, Clevin's the only guy that is seemingly playing for that third spot. And perhaps as well as draft pedigree being taken in the second round, the connections with Jake Sanderson, people see those guys as like, we got Clevin for Sanderson and vice versa to perhaps a lesser extent. But I think people see that as, it's like, well, we got Clevin to play with Sanderson and Sanderson's playing, so Clevin should play, is perhaps where people are coming from. I mean, I'm relatively high on the guy. I think that.
Oh, me too. And his great value is that he gives them something that they don't have back there, right?
Yeah, and that's
he
the
gives
thing.
them some size and some a little bit of a presence around the net. Although it's one game and he's a young guy, but I thought there were a couple of times where he kind of got outmaneuvered in front of the net last night, where his strength, his calling card in the National Hockey League is going to be a guy that's going to be able to control opposition sticks in front of the net and box people out.
Yeah.
And he got beat in one of those circumstances on one of the goals.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not sounding alarm bells or anything like that. But I just think like everybody should be pumping the brakes a little bit on Tyler Clevin. Give the kid the space and the time to find his way here, because it seems like the expectations for me are unrealistically high at this point. Do you agree with that? Am I overstating that? I don't know.
I don't think you're necessarily overstating it. I think part of the rationale as well is perhaps why Sens fans feel that way. And I know we on this podcast certainly went through this back in the shortened, 2021 season, where it felt like we got a lot of, I say this as someone who can barely skate, but low skill veterans that were in order to provide competition for places for the younger guys. And I feel like most Sens fans would have said, just play the younger guys. And in this particular season, it doesn't really matter if they're
Right.
crap or not, because it's about getting them reps and getting them game time and stuff. And I
Right.
guess that's all I would say about Clevin is like, like, yeah, like I can see the wisdom to an extent of getting, like a veteran guy near the end of his career to maybe push Clevin for that spot and make him work for it. But that, on the other hand, it's like, we picked Clevin to play in that position. Like, you may as well just play him and let him work it out on the ice and, get him ready for the NHL that much sooner.
Yeah. I just, again, having, done this longer than I would like to admit, there's just like seen so many kids, especially guys on the blue line that just, have a crisis in confidence because, they're getting beat. And right now I look at it and I'm like, okay, so even if you wanted to give Clevin a breather after a couple of rough games, what are you putting in? What are your options to put
Yeah,
him?
that's the worrying thing.
Isn't it? Like, and to me, that's part of the learning process for a young player, particularly a young defenseman. Is like sometimes the best thing to do is just sit in the press box and realize what's going on. And again, cliches, you hear it from guys who are in that position all the time. Oh, when I watch from up top, I realize, you know what, maybe I've got a little bit more time than what I thought I did.
Right.
And I can see the game. It slows down a little bit for me when I'm up there, and I'll use that when I get back into the lineup. I'm like, right now, what are you going to do if Clevin has a little bit of a rough patch, which I think is inevitable? Right now, I don't even know what the option is if you wanted to give him a break.
Yeah. Well,
It's
we are talking about young defensemen on the blue line, and you already brought him up a little bit, but top draft pick Carter Yakemchuk, who I think there was some chatter when he was selected, maybe people might have preferred to see another guy taken there. I was certainly one of those people, I'll openly admit it. But you said he's looked really positive in preseason so far. I want to hear your thoughts on Yakemchuk, and what do you think his pathway is going to be for the Senators in this season and perhaps the season after that?
Well, as you would expect, the hype machine was overheating last night after that goal that he scored, given all the circumstances, a coast to coast rush in overtime against a loaded Leafs lineup in Toronto. I've been really impressed with them. It was interesting listening to Travis Green's comments after the game too about how the kid has progressed, and he said it's not even been the offensive ability that's impressed Green, but it's been the kid's coachability and
right.
his willingness to listen, and not just listen, but absorb and put into practice the points that the coaching staff has been making to him. So so what's the path now? I said last night after that performance, he certainly earned himself the right to stick around for a little while. And by that, some people were like, I saw on X, some people were like, "Are you giving him a spot on the team?" I'm like, no, he's just earned the opportunity to stick around training camp, maybe a little bit longer than an 18-year-old kid. I guess he's 19 next week.
Right.
A little bit longer than a teenager might be expected to stick around in NHL training camp. And my thing is like, keep giving him, I'd dress him again in the next game. Keep giving him the opportunities and see how he handles them. And a kid like that, you're almost living day to day with him. You're monitoring how he's doing clearly on the ice, how he's handling practice, how he's handling the workload when you do play games, how he's dealing with the matchups, and probably most importantly, what's his emotional state? Where is he mentally? Is his confidence still there? Is he he's still listening with the intensity that the coach has talked about? You got to monitor all of those things on a daily basis with a kid like him. But I think right now, with that performance last night, he did not look out of place at all. He's earned the right, I think, to stick around training camp for a little bit longer to get some more exhibition games, and then you keep making your decisions from there. He wouldn't be the first kid who came in And like I said, he'd be 19 by the time the regular season starts. He wouldn't be the first guy that's come in at 19 and earned himself a good look. And maybe he earns himself the opportunity to stick around for the beginning of the regular season. You've always got that 9-game trial period, right? To
Yeah.
see how a guy can handle it before you send him back to junior. Right now, if you're going to ask me what's the best path for him, which I think you just did, I think the best thing is keep him around camp for as long as you can, as long as he's as the pace of camp ramps up, as teams start whittling down their rosters, and you're seeing more and more NHL players in the preseason games. Monitor how he does, and let him get a taste of that. I still think the best thing for him is going to be back to the dub and play a huge role on the World Junior team. Playing in the WJC, that's
Right.
going to be right here
Yeah.
in Ottawa. But that typically is the tried and true path of making sure that these kids progress the way that you want them to. But right now, geez, what a pleasant surprise he's been.
And I think one thing that they really hope, and who knows, keeping him around camp and maybe even, getting time in the regular season if he continues to play really well, that might force other WHL teams that are going to be championship contending teams to say, hey, this guy may not come back. We should start looking into trade value if he does.
Right.
Because I know there's been a lot of chatter on the fact that his team is not good.
Right.
And they want him on a WHL championship contending team.
Right.
And he'll get a lot. He will get a lot of draft picks for his team when the time does inevitably come. But I can just see with the type of owner that Michael Andlauer is, and the connections that Steve Staios has within the hockey circles is, can you trade Carter? Can you find a
sure.
dance partner and get him
Oh
somewhere?
yeah, no, those absolutely, those conversations go on all the time. And the agents, agents will be involved, will be involved as well. So basically what you're saying is it's going to be one of those major junior trades where they're trading kids who are like 8 years old right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because they're going to trade like 8 draft picks for them.
I think when a
in 2030.
Yakimchuk was traded, he got like 7 picks and 3 of them were first rounders or something. And like a Yakimchuk is a good player, but I don't think he's quite the other level of Chuck in Yakimchuk. So
Hey, maybe
he's a defenseman, and he's an offensive right shot defenseman. Like I think if you're going down the list of boxes that you're going to check in terms of the type of impact player that in junior hockey could change the fortunes of your team, boy, apart from a Connor McDavid type forward, a 30-goal scoring right shot defenseman who's big and physical, come on, I don't know if it gets much better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already hearing that teams are making calls for the rights to Ryder Kachuk, so
I wouldn't doubt it.
But speaking of, the season coming up, a whole new feel, I wanted to touch on the fact that this is the first year where the ownership situation hasn't been dragged out over the summer. It's been firmly in place. You have Steve Staios, who is firmly in place without question as the GM of the team. Travis Green is not a coach who some would describe as, being a lame duck or in a position where they're going to get fired this season. They don't have any of the team drama where we're talking about guys who aren't ready to play coming into the season, players being suspended for betting scandals, trading mishaps where the team's losing draft picks. It seems like finally they're in a place where that isn't a factor. And I know a couple of the players who mentioned this in their either exit interviews last season or first interviews with their new teams, mentioned the outside noise. And, this season, they don't have any of that. So essentially, I wanted to know what your thoughts were on this whole outside noise factor. And with the situation and stability in the front office and ownership level, is this going to actually help the team on the ice?
Well, you mean so they've finally got to a place where they're kind of like a regular NHL team?
Kind of, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I don't think there's any question that all of those things that you described in terms of the I'll just call it a sense of normalcy. Like, the circumstances under which most National Hockey League teams operate, where you don't have an owner who's most of the time stealing the headlines, or the general manager making what many would interpret as outrageous statements about the state of his team. Usually you hear players say things like, well, I'm dating myself now. I don't even think it's true. Oh, I don't read the papers. Or I don't, nobody does now.
They're all online now.
Yes, I don't read the papers, or I don't listen to the radio, and you're right. We just try and control all the things that we can control. Well, we saw clear evidence last year that there were many circumstances that evolved that were a distraction to the team. And I point just to, Brady Tkachuk, for instance, having to address the fans chanting, fire DJ. Like he was, you speak about fired. Brady was fired up, having to address those chants from the fans. And, that wasn't the only circumstance where players were in a situation where they had to address things that were clearly out of their control. But become a distraction. And, we're still in the honeymoon phase with the new ownership. It just keeps getting better and better with, the positive news about LeBreton Flats. And, I'm still, I guess, until there's shovels in the ground, going to be a little bit skeptical, because I still feel like there's a number of negotiations and things that have to happen before we're going to see that first shovel in the ground. But the fact that we're in a place now where those negotiations can actually take place is just in itself a really positive development. And now we're just into the NCC and Andlauer and his partners, basically just coming up like, what's the number? There's a number there that's going to work for both parties at some point. And I'm really encouraged, having followed the NCC and this type of story, going back to the days of Bruce Firestone, driving up and down the Queensway, contemplating what could be a possible place for an NHL rink when he was thinking about trying to bring back the Senators. The NCC's always been like one of those kind of shady government organizations, didn't really have to answer to anybody. And I think about Bruce Firestone's story when he was wondering about putting a rink at LeBreton Flats or on some other federally owned land, and went to Jean Piggott, who was the head of the NCC at that time, and pitched his idea to her. And she basically said to him, do you want the public answer, or do you want the private answer? And he was like, give me both. And the public answer was, well, we're intrigued by this idea. We'll study it and get back to you. And she said basically the private answer was, come on, not a chance.
Right.
So I'm still a little jaded when it comes to the NCC and its internal workings. But the most significant thing in what we heard the other day was that they moved off of their traditional position of leasing land to being willing to sell it. And to me, that was the tipping point in making this deal work. Andlauer wants, and his partners, probably more importantly, his partners, his real estate partners, who he admits know way more about these kind of developments than he does, that they needed to own the land. And the fact now that the NCC moved off of their traditional position of leasing land, like for 50 years or for 99 years or whatever, the fact that they moved off that now and they're ready to sell the land, and now it just becomes a negotiation, to me was the most significant development out of all of that. And gives me, this jaded old guy who's always skeptical, a little more hope that actually this is not going to be another false start, and that they could legitimately be on the path of having a new rink there.
Well, I was gonna touch on LeBreton, but you covered it, so thank you.
And talking about quality pieces of land.
Oh, what a great segue. Oh my
Wow,
God.
nice.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit to get there.
No, I love it.
But
Go for it.
yeah, we're talking about quality pieces of land. You know, Michael Andlauer buying the Ottawa Senators, quality deal there. But I think one of the most significant quality deals that we have seen as Ottawa Senators fans recently is getting rid of a horrendous goaltending contract and finding this beautiful Swedish goalie who stops pucks at an amazing rate in Linus Ullmark. Chris,
I don't even
what
care
are
if
your
he stops
thoughts?
pucks. I just love listening to him talk.
Yeah.
As a
He's so
media guy,
likable.
isn't he? Like, as a media guy, I just like, here's a guy who's got a different, quite a different perspective on life in the National Hockey League and what's important. And I haven't seen him stop a puck yet. But I'm just impressed with the attitude that he brings to a team that is sorely in need of the dressing room door being opened and a little bit of fresh air being blown through there. And he seems to be just the type of personality. Never mind what he can do on the ice, but what remains to be seen. I just think listening to him talk and the attitude that he has brought in so far, to me, potentially, of course, he has to stop pucks, but all that other stuff, to me, potentially might be the most important thing that he contributes to this team. And I loved a comment that he had the other day about, I think he was in the context of being asked, what can you bring from your experience playing from a great team and organization like the Boston Bruins? You know, what can you transport here to Ottawa? And his answer was something along the lines of, basically making these guys understand having 1 or 2 good days a week is not good enough. You need to be good every day, and you need to get into the mindset of knowing the routines and the approaches and the thought patterns that you need to get to that place where you do it every day. And I thought, you know what, that's exactly what these guys need to hear after having watched this team. And the young guys haven't been here for all of the 7 years that they've missed the playoffs. But that message that he had, that if you want to excel in this league, you need to do it every day. Having a good practice a couple of times a week, it's not good enough. And I feel like that's kind of been accepted and was accepted by the previous coaching regime. And, maybe that's been one of the important things that Travis Green's going to bring here too, because it feels like he's going to have that same kind of standard. That it's not good enough just to have 1 or 2 good practices a week. The goal needs to be to have a great practice, be a great practice player, and introduce those habits to your game and to your hockey life every single day. And I think Ullmark, coming in as a respected guy, a Vezina Trophy winner, coming from a good organization, that's probably the most important message that he's going to be able to give these guys.
Yeah, you raised such a good point about consistency, and we've spoken a lot on this podcast. I'm sure other people have as well, about sort of the culture of mediocrity that has persisted since the Melnick era, and Andlauer and Co. have been slowly trying to chip away at that over the last year and a bit.
Yep.
And certainly, I think we all felt that there was just a culture within the team of, oh yeah, it's okay if you have a bad game, you'll get them next time, kind of thing. And we would sit here in this podcast and we say, good players don't have bad games once a week. Good players have bad games like once a month or once every couple months. Good goalies don't let in a bad goal a game. They let in a bad goal a week or a bad goal a month. You know, it's like, how many times would we sit here and be like, oh, I wish, you know, Korpisalo wishes he would have had that back. You know, we said that probably once or twice a game, like game in, game out.
And in the first 2 minutes of the game.
Yes, usually, yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that that's what we're all hoping for, is like guys like Ullmark, that they can come in and they can show what it's like to just be good night in, night out. And I think that,
to be a good pro.
Yeah, to be a good pro. And I think even
pro.
some of our, you know, prized, you know, young stars, like the Stutzlers and Bradys of the world, you know, like these are the guys, the rock in which we will build our church, and they're here to stay, and we want to see them succeed. But I think there's even times that guys like that, you know, how often would we be like, oh, like Stutzler wasn't at his best tonight, or Brady wasn't at his best tonight? And, you know, it's like happened far too often, I think. And, you know,
but it's even like getting that, I like saying over and over again, it's always like that they have to get to that place where they understand there's a lot of times in a game where it's more important to stop a goal than it is to score one.
Yeah.
And to me, you bring up Stutzla and Kachuk. You know, to me, there were too many times where like one of those guys would have like a foot outside his blue line when there was like a 50-50 puck down near the hash mark. And it was like, I'm going to hope that we win that battle. And maybe that's going to lead to us getting some kind of odd man break, or we'll get a scoring chance out of it, rather than having the attitude of, yeah, I better be back in the zone and make sure that if my teammate loses this 50-50 battle, that it's not going to evolve into a bona fide scoring chance for the other team, which happened way too often, right? How many times did we just see mistake upon mistake upon mistake compounded in the Ottawa zone until it wound up to some kind of point blank glorious chance for the other team? And to me, when I'm evaluating where this team is this year and the progress that it's made, to me, it's going to be how much time are they spending in their own end, and how many one and dones are they giving the other team now, where they're not allowing these multiple chances in their end because guys are cheating.
Yeah.
And to me, that's going to be the yardstick that I use to evaluate where this team is progressing. They can score goals. They've got some wonderfully talented young players who have showed that they're capable of scoring goals in this league. But that's only a small part of the equation when it comes to being, you know, a respected player in this league and a player that plays on a really good team, a perennial playoff team. And to me, that's a huge divide right now that they need to cross. And that's, to me, that's going to be Travis Green's biggest challenge, is going to be changing the mindset of Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stutzla, Drake Batherson, Shane Pinto, Thomas Chabot. Go down the list of all your core guys who have been here for a while and have been a part of, like you said, this culture of mediocrity over the last few years. The biggest challenge is going to be getting those guys to understand what it takes to be a good pro and what it takes to be part of a winning team. For all the additions they've made this year, and Ullmark's no question among the most significant, but you know, for the Noah Gregors and the Amadios and name whoever else, David Perrin, everybody that they've brought in. None of those guys is going to play more minutes than Brady Tkachuk or Tim Stutzla or Drake Batherson, Shane Pinto. Go down the list. They are still the guys that are going to play the most minutes on your team, and by extension, have the greatest impact on the outcome of that game, because they have those majority of the minutes. So until they change the way that they play, to me, you can make all the changes around them that you want. But until they understand what it takes to play winning hockey in the National Hockey League, you're kind of spinning your wheels. So to me, that's going to be the biggest challenge for Travis Green is getting that core group of young guys to understand the way that you need to play to be a playoff team. And to me, that's going to be the most interesting thing to monitor as this season goes on.
And one of the things that I kind of wanted to touch on too, going back to Ullmark, because you mentioned that you're a little jaded about the Sens, as is our own Bennett. Bennett does not see Ullmark signing here. Where are you at on that?
I'd say right now, one, the perfect scenario would have been trade for him and have him sign a deal, right?
Yeah.
That would have been the great scenario. From his standpoint, I completely understand what he's doing. He doesn't know anything about Ottawa. He doesn't know anything about the city. He didn't know anything about the players or the team or anything else. I completely understand him wanting to come here and see firsthand what's involved here. Now, preliminary reports, he's been glowing about the city. He loves it, and he knew it was going to be a tough adjustment for his kids, but apparently his kids have taken to it, which is, a huge factor for a player. Player doesn't need to go home and be hearing his family complaining about where they are and why are we here, and it seems like that the opposite is the case, that everybody's happy being here. So to me, that's a great first step. That he said all the right things so far, and that he bought a house. And honestly, these guys buy houses left and right. So I don't read a lot. I don't read a lot into that. They can afford to buy a house and sell it a year later. So part of what Travis Green and Steve Staios and Andlauer, this is going to go right to the top because he's a franchise type player, potentially a franchise type player. This year is going to be crucial in selling Linus Ullmark on the idea of being a long-term part of the Ottawa Senators. So, am I concerned about that at this point? Sure, you would have to be. Think about his situation. He could be an unrestricted free agent. What, 3 years removed from winning the Vezina Trophy? And if he comes here and it winds up that his numbers aren't as stellar as they were in Boston, which is the likely scenario, I feel like a lot of people, a lot of general managers around the league who might be looking to sign him would just look and be like, well, it was Ottawa. he was playing in Ottawa. Come on. Whose numbers are going to be good in Ottawa? If he does come in here and he's a critical piece to helping fix the defensive issues that the Senators have, and there's that magic number of 3, right? You are only a playoff team in the National Hockey League if your goals against average is below 3. That is the magic number. You look at the top 16 teams in the league, and number 16 is almost always around 3. If he comes in and he's part of turning that around, to me, that just enhances him even more as a potential free agent. Geez, look what he did. He went into Ottawa, which was, the goalie graveyard trademark. And he helped fix that situation. So I can't see how he would handle this any more differently than coming in, trying to find out what the city is like, first of all, for his family, what the culture of the team is like, how ownership goes about its business, how management goes about its business. Does he like the coach? Does the coach, is the coach's message getting through to his teammates? Why would he not just wait and see? He's in the driver's seat right now in this whole scenario. So, right now, am I shocked or perturbed or concerned or worried? No, I think this is exactly how this was going to play itself out. And the best thing that can happen is that, Travis Green helps this team get off to a great start. Ullmark has a great start. And I think at that point, you start making him think that, yes, this team's on the rise. And I love the city. My kids love the city. My family loves the city. Maybe this is the place that I want to make my my longer term home for the next, whatever it winds up being, 8 years or whatever. So, right now I think this is kind of unfolding the way that I thought it would unfold. And if I was reading the tea leaves, I'd say so far so good.
Just need to get Howie Mandel in here. Make a deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I cannot see that. I can't see that happening before the new year. Like I think he's really going to want to. He's going to want to see how these guys go about their business, and is this a place that I want to that I want to put down roots and call home for the foreseeable future. And like I said, right now I would say so far so good. Everybody at least is saying the right things, and I haven't heard any kind of behind the scenes stuff which sometimes come out where the agent or the player just basically says, no, I'm not going to sign. I want to try the free agent market. We haven't heard that.
Yeah,
Right.
We haven't heard that. So he's keeping all of his. It sounds like he's keeping all of his options open, which he should. This is his one time in his career to hit a major home run, right?
yeah.
This is his shot to sign that life-changing. Seems ridiculous to say that for a guy who's already making $5 million a year.
Yeah.
But that, upper echelon kind of money that gives you generational wealth type thing.
Well,
Yeah.
there's two things that I want to mention before I know Bennett has one final question for you before we finish off here. But
Yeah.
two of the things I like about Ullmark is one, or at least the possibility of him resigning is one, Erik Karlsson and Daniel Alfredsson both trying to help him out, get acquainted with the city, give him advice, tips, stuff like that. I think it speaks volumes when a player who hasn't even been in Ottawa for 6 years now is helping a guy who's new to Ottawa get acquainted with the city. I think that is just incredible. Like Erik Karlsson's now on his second team removed from Ottawa. So that's really cool. I think that's a cool storyline. The second thing, which right now is escaping me, which I love.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. Memory, not my forte. There was one other thing. Oh, is that when he signed with Boston, he said, after Buffalo, Boston came calling, and he was like, oh, I can't turn down playing for a team like that. Like, that's a great organization.
Yeah.
What was interesting is after being traded to Ottawa, he said he's always wanted to play for a Canadian organization.
Right.
So my hopes are with, some of the support from hometown guys that he would have a good relationship with, who obviously really enjoy the city. Alfie wouldn't be a part of the coaching staff if he wanted to be elsewhere. And
no, that's fair. Yeah.
Karlsson has no need whatsoever to take the initiative to reach out to Linus Ullmark. And I think that's a good sign. And yeah, he's wanted to play for a Canadian franchise. He tried going for a contender and it didn't work out with Boston. Nothing's guaranteed in the NHL. So if you find a place that you really enjoy and you have the support of, other Swedes and your teammates and coach, management, whatever, I don't know. I think obviously I'm a bit of a hopeless optimist sometimes. I'm sure Bennett could vouch for that, but I just think there are some good signs around the situation that could prove fruitful when Ottawa tries to sit down and have some serious conversations with Ullmark.
After, again, family and everything is obviously very important to him. I think the biggest thing that Senators fans could hope for and wish for is that we have a white Christmas. Because he talked about his kids being so excited that there was going to be snow and that they would be able to have a white Christmas. So
right.
Cross your fingers that it's not going to be the situation that we've had for the last couple of years, and that indeed we have a white Christmas, which could be, I don't know, is that like the puff of white smoke when we're picking a new pope? Maybe it's going to show that Ullmark is going to wind up signing in Ottawa because his kids get to go out tobogganing on Christmas Day.
Yeah, and listen, if it's not a white Christmas, then us and all the other Sens fans will go to his house and pour flour off of their gutters or something, because we'll
go to all of our local ice rinks.
Yeah,
get a couple. Exactly.
Yep.
One thing about
full
that
court
is
press.
Yeah. I loved his comment about, well, we don't hear sirens at night, so that's pretty cool. And I was like, oh my God, geez, Louise.
Yeah. That's why I said, like, he's a bit of a different cat, which is fantastic. And I know a few weeks back, I guess it was just after Labor Day, the Senators had a schmooze fest with the local media and influencers. I think some of you guys might have even been there when they were trotting out all the new concession stuff and everything else, and Ullmark had the opportunity to speak. And I liked when he walked up to the podium and he said something like, "I'll take questions in French first."
Yeah.
Like, just like that kind of, I don't even know what word to use to describe it, but just that kind of offbeat, like, sense of humor is
Oh,
such
he's cheeky.
yeah,
That's how I would put it.
that's a
He's
good word.
cheeky.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
such a refreshing approach for a guy who, should be one of the big and key personalities for this team. And hopefully some of that's going to rub off. Like I said, that I think the dressing room needed a little bit of fresh air, and it feels like he, as much as he's going to bring on the ice, maybe what he's going to bring off the ice is going to be just as, or even more important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we all hope that, it's a successful landing here in Ottawa. And we have, thanks so much for everything that you've touched on already, CJ. We have one final question for you. And that's that we've talked about the big names, we've talked about the small names, and we've even talked about the future names and guys like Yakemchuk. But who do you think can really surprise Sens fans this year? And you can take that positively or negatively.
Yeah.
Who do you think is gonna end up being a storyline?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I don't know if he's going to be a surprise or a disappointment at this point, but I just feel like that Nick Jensen's going to be a huge part of how things evolve on that blue line. Like, they've brought him in to be that kind of stabilizing guy, and it remains to be seen who he's going to play with, because I think people had a lot of assumptions made already about how the pairs were going to look, and they haven't had any of those guys, any of those kind of projected guesses at what the blue line might look like. None of those pairs have happened to this point. So to me, ask, but surprise or disappointment, I just think that guy is going to be a massive key. If he can play like he did a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and I've liked his camp. I think he's looked just fine. But to me, that's going to be another critical piece on a thin blue line already. Bringing in a guy who's getting up there in years, and many in Washington felt like was past it, and whose best years have been behind him, are behind him. I think that's a guy that I'm really going to be watching to see, because I think he's really going to be kind of like that linchpin that is going to carry a lot of the weight of the success or lack of success of this blue line.
Yeah, I think
Tim Stützle is going to have, watching him in training camp, I think he's going to have a monster year. Like, look out. I think he's just looks at what happened last year, both from an individual and one power play goal. Is that true?
Yeah, he did not light things up on the power play. It's crazy.
So, I just think he's come in, and like I said, that the energy and the edge that he's had so far in training camp, he looks like a guy who just cannot wait already for the regular season to start. So I think Tim Stützle is going to have a monster year for them.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll leave off on that note is I believe the Ottawa Senators posted a clip. It was Jake Sanderson and Brady Tkachuk battling it out on the boards. And then at the very end of the clip, you see Stützle and Hamonic have a matchup, and it's just Stützle's gone. The Hamonic has no chance, in the dust. And it was like maybe a second or two right at the end, and you just see him, boom, he's gone.
And the comments were like, I really want to see how that one finished.
So he's gonna be a treat this year, I think.
Looking forward to it. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Chris. The time kind of flew by, but we always appreciate getting your insight on these things. And maybe next time we'll try to aim for fewer than 3 years till we see you again.
That sounds good to me. Let's make it 2 years. So I'll talk to you again.
Okay, yeah. We'll just
Meet
keep
in the
winding it
middle.
down.
Yeah.
Yes, let's do it. Let's leave it at we'll do it again this season. How's that?
Sounds good.
Sounds like
I
a
like
plan.
I like that. Yeah. Awesome. For anyone who's looking to follow CJ on social media, you can find him at CJ_Stevenson on X or Twitter, as it was formerly called. And we're going to include that in the description as well, so you can find it there. If you
and you can always listen in for the Senators pre and post game shows on TSN 1200. I'm part of the regular rotation there, and drop in now and then when they'll have me to host some of the shows. So give it a listen, and please like interact. And it's great to hear from how do I put this, most of the fans, and we'll go from there. Thanks again for having me, and we'll like I said, maybe we'll shoot to do this about halfway through the season, and we can do our evaluation of where things stand at that point.
That's right.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, thanks
All right.
guys.
Thanks everybody.
CJ.
And as always, go Sens go.
Go Sens go.
Go Sens go.